Sorry for the lapse in time between post and update. I've been too upset to continue until now. When I emerged into the hallway, it was apparent immediately that I had not been singular in my experience. The students were laughing and talking as if nothing had happened, but the faculty was slowly appearing into the hallway with dazed and fearful expressions on their faces. Some of them looked worse off than I felt. The principal made an announcement for all students to report to the gymnasium for the remainder of the day, and we all gathered together and began to exchange our stories. A few of those I have included here. The similarities became evident quite early on, and we all eventually settled into silence, enjoying the safety of each other's company. Here are some of the most unsettling tales. Jessica. Class had just started and we were listening to an audio recording of Julius Caesar. I was immersed in my book, so I didn't even notice the change right away. God, I wish I had. A few minutes into the reading, I glanced up and all of the students were standing a few feet away from my desk, smiling with their eyes wide open. I figured it was a joke they had staged, so I reached down and paused the audio and started laughing. They all concurrently took one step toward me. As scary as that was, it was nothing compared to the sound of my exact laughter being replicated by the entire class, like a chorus of doppelgangers. I was so startled that I jumped out of my chair and flung myself backwards into the wall. They took another step toward me and their smiles widened. This was when I figured out they mimicked movement with movement. I slowly tried to right my position with as little motion as possible in order to get more comfortable. They took 2 more steps toward my desk before I had managed to complete my task. By this time I was silently crying and praying for help, and my students were only a foot away from my desk, clustered together, leaning toward me, with an excited grin threatening to split the skin on their lips. I don't know how I managed to hold still until the class was over, but somehow I did. Phil. I was walking around the room, reciting a poem when it began. I heard the sound, but didn't really pay it much attention because there are always weird noises coming from my intercom. I kept walking around, reading for another 30 seconds before I realised something was wrong. When I turned to face the class, they were all standing in a conga line smiling at me. I smiled back at them thinking they were pranking me. Boy, was I wrong. In response to my smile, they immediately stopped smiling, lowered their heads, and took one perfectly synchronized step towards me. I turned around and ran like hell toward my door. They pursued me, and right as my hand hit the doorknob, I felt a hot breath on my neck. Not brave enough to turn around, I crumpled to the ground with my arms cradling my head, where I remained motionless until the bell. The stories were all very much alike, each one a small glimmer of the terror we had just succumbed to. During our conversation, some held it together like prize fighters while others sobbed uncontrollably into their palms. It was obvious we were all altered versions of our once stronger selves. It was eerie how quickly we all began feeling and acting normally again. Within just half an hour or so, we were all beginning to relax and even laugh a little at ourselves. It was then that we noticed Pat was missing. Afraid of what could have happened to her and what we might find when she was located, a small group decided to go and check her classroom. Pat's room was pitch black when we approached. None of the rooms in our wing of the building had windows because they were once larger rooms broken up into multiple classes to accommodate our growing programs and the need for extra space. This makes it eerily dark when the lights are off. I peered into the small rectangular opening on her door, hoping to catch a glimpse of her inside. It was impossible to see anything in the room, so we were forced to go inside. Somehow I had been appointed the leader of our small search and rescue party, so I went in first. Blindly feeling the wall for the light switch, my fingers fumbled for a few seconds before finding my target. The large room was illuminated with the harsh, fluorescent glow of the rows of ceiling lights, casting strange shadows on the empty desks. There were no students and no Pat. Her teacher desk sat abandoned in the far right corner of her room, away from any possible exit. If she had gotten out, we would have seen her in the hallway, but we didn't. Where could she have gone? The three of us went deeper into her room looking for clues for her whereabouts. Several of the desks had been overturned and a few of the books had been knocked off her desk. Realizing this could be an indicator of a struggle, I walked closer, fearing what I may find. A small, weak sound could be heard from under her desk. Trembling, I made my way around to the rear and slowly pulled her chair back to reveal the space below. Huddled in a small ball, we found Pat. She was covered in scratches on her face and neck, blood oozing from the multitude of wounds. Her hands were covering her head in a defensive gesture, and patches of hair were littered around her small frame. She had been attacked. Trying not to startle her, I slowly kneeled down and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Pat screamed and began thrashing about wildly. She reminded me of a caged raccoon, rabid with its desire to escape its captors. I made my voice as low and soothing as possible and cooed relaxing words to her. Slowly she began to settle down. We were able to remove her from the small space and set her down in a chair, but she was unable to speak coherently to explain to us what had happened. The best I can do to tell you Pat's tale is to transcribe her broken, mumbling and somewhat manic words from the small time we spent alone with her in the room. Sound, strange, war, intercom. Students, different, wild. Smiling, evil, scary, smiling. Smiling. Silent, no voices. Mimicking, awful. Tried to help. Walked toward them, charged me. Ran nowhere to go. Must hide. Screaming. Was I screaming? No, they were screaming. No, we were all screaming. So much screaming. Screaming. Chasing me. Can feel them on my back. Hands grab hair, painful. Why? Must hide. Help! More hands. Desk, get under desk. Must hide. Screaming, them, me, us. They are me. I am them. Desk, I can see it. More hands. Under desk. Safe. No. Hands everywhere. Face hurts. Hair hurts. Scared. This was all she said before she passed out. The paramedics had come and taken her away. I don't know what to say regarding Pat's story other than I'm glad I didn't move. We were all afraid of what the next days will bring. I went to school today. I couldn't put that responsibility on a stranger. And could you imagine the craziness of those subplans? If the class becomes zombies, sit completely still and silent until the next bell. Okay, that doesn't make me sound like a total nutter or anything. The school is oddly deserted today. I would say only half of my students are here in every class. They all seem to be behaving normally so far, but it is only first period. All of the teachers, except Pat, who I hear is in psych for a 3-day evaluation, have shown up for work today. You know how I know we're all here? I haven't moved from my doorway the entire morning. I'm writing this on the notes on my phone. If that happens again, I'm getting the hell out of here as quickly as possible. Now that I know what can happen if they get to you, there is no way I'm taking that chance. Judging from the other shadows I see up and down the hallway, I'm not alone in this way of thinking. The intercoms have been disabled to try and avoid another problem, as the administration labelled it. They have done a dynamite job of covering up the whole thing. You won't see this in the news. You won't read this in the paper. We have an excellent PR department. Forget about any other schools getting a warning. We must preserve our reputation at any cost. We have all been given explicit instructions in crisis management to make us more comfortable if a problem should arise, but they are confident it won't. You should be safe, they say. I'm sure it was a one-time occurrence. We will do whatever we can to make sure this does not happen again. Precautions have been taken to disable any and all mass communication from inside the building. Who knows? Maybe they are right. I'm going to try and do my best to teach my students despite the circumstances. I would love to keep writing, but I have to go now. My students' cell phones all just rang. Now we wait.